Before we go any further, give me 3 minutes. I'm 87 years old, and one question has rewritten every story I told myself about the world, about God, about love, and about what a good life truly is. Whether you pray daily or haven't stepped inside a sanctuary since childhood, this matters to you. I can't promise answers, but I can promise clarity about what actually guides a life. Stay with me. I wasted decades defending my certainty. Then one night, a simple question cut through the noise and left me quiet, honest, and strangely free. It saved my marriage. I grew up in town where the steeple cast a long shadow over everything. Sundays were for hymns, Mondays for work, and questions were for whispering after lights out. My father fixed engines, my mother taught reading, and everyone agreed the rules were clear. Be decent, be certain, be like everyone else. I tried. I recited verses, signed pledges, married young, and equated confidence with truth. It worked until it didn't. Life kept handing me puzzles that didn't fit the picture on the box. A miscarriage, a dishonest boss, a prayer that met only silence. I kept smiling anyway. T39, the neat boxes collapsed. My brother called at dawn, voice shaking. Our mother had fainted in her garden, blue hydrangeas bright against the grass, ambulance lights washing the porch. She lived, but the fragility of it all stunned me. Later that year, a friend's son didn't come home from a routine surgery. I stood by the casserole table, tasting metal, listening to people reach for phrases they didn't believe. I wasn't angry yet. I was hollow. I stared at ceilings, bargaining for explanations, and the more I gripped certainty, the quicker it leaked through my hands. Everywhere, ache. The first crack came from an unexpected corner. A hospital janitor named Luis, sweeping the corridor outside my mother's room, paused when he saw my face. He didn't offer a verse. He offered a question. What if you're wrong about what this moment needs? I blinked. He smiled softly and kept moving. That night, I sat in the plastic chair by the bed, hearing the beeps, watching breath settle into rhythm, and realized I'd been treating belief like armor. Armor is good for battle. It's terrible for hugging your mother's hand. I loosened my grip and simply said, I'm here. That small pivot opened a much larger door. Weeks later, a friend from synagogue invited me to a Friday dinner. Months later, an atheist neighbor asked if I'd join his ethics book club. For a while I said no, guarding my tidy categories. Then one evening, standing in my sink, I whispered the sentence that would change everything. What if I'm wrong? Not as surrender, but as a lens. What if I've misnamed enemies? What if I've mistaken volume for conviction, answers for avoidance, fear for faith? I wrote it on a sticky note and taped it to my mirror. I tested the question everywhere. In my marriage, when arguments circled the same drain, I paused and asked, what if I'm wrong about what she meant or what she needs? Instead of defending my point, I got curious, and curiosity softened everything. In church, I asked it when doctrine sounded like locks instead of keys. In conversations about politics, I tried it before I rolled my eyes. What if I'm wrong about their story? Sometimes I still disagreed. Often, I listen longer. I learned the difference between being right and becoming kind. Only one of those makes dinner taste better. Why, son? And I didn't speak for nearly a year after he came out, and I answered with fear disguised as concern. I told myself I was protecting him. He heard judgment. One afternoon, gripping the steering wheel outside his apartment, I asked my question out loud, voice shaking. What if I'm wrong about what love requires here? I went upstairs, knocked, and said, I'm probably wrong about a lot. Teach me how to be your dad again. We cried. We set new ground rules. We traded certainty for connection, and I got my son back without losing my soul. Later, when my heart murmured in a way doctors didn't like, the question kept me steady. I used to meet anxiety with information hoarding and late-night spirals. This time, I asked, what if I'm wrong about control? What if the next loving thing is sleep, water, a walk in the sun? I followed my cardiologist's plan, called my granddaughter to laugh about her science fair volcano, and let neighbors bring soup. Not because I was sure it would fix anything, but because certainty wasn't the point anymore. Presence was. Gratitude was. I slept. and the world didn't end. I woke. If you're 19 and allergic to sanctuaries, try the question on your anger. What if you're wrong about what all believers are like? If you're devout and convinced out is decay, try it too. What if you're wrong about what God refuses to use? If you're my age and lonely, ask it kindly. What if you're wrong about being finished? The point isn't to erase convictions. It's to hold them open enough for love to breathe. The people who changed me most didn't win arguments. They stayed, listened, asked better questions, and kept their hands gentle while my mind shifted that I didn't become vague. If anything, I became sharper about what matters. The question didn't shrink my world. It expanded my responsibilities. It asked me to notice the person in front of me, not the argument in my head. It asked me to trade speed for presence, noise for wonder, pride for repair. I still wake up stubborn some days. But when I whisper the words, "What if I'm wrong?" my shoulders drop and the room brightens. Tomorrow, I'll tell you how this question rescued a stranger at a bus station and how it finally taught me to forgive myself. It was February, the kind of cold that makes the air ring. I was at the downtown bus station because my car was in the shop and pride needed the exercise. An ad flickered above the benches, selling a vacation I couldn't imagine taking, and a girl in a denim jacket sat 2 rows over, crying like she'd been trying not to for miles. A man in a bright vest swept salt into a pile. I wanted to offer the sermon I used to carry around, "You're strong, it gets better, chin up." Instead, I breathed, put my hand on the question taped inside my chest, and asked myself, what if I'm wrong about what this moment needs? Maybe advice wasn't love. Maybe company was. I walked over slow, sat 1 seat away, kept my eyes on the schedule board so she could keep hers on whatever horizon she needed. After a minute, I said, "I've got an extra tea ticket they gave me by mistake. Would you help me use it so it doesn't go to waste?" She nodded without looking. We got up together, and I paid for 2 hot cups and 3 sugars. We stood by the condiment station, steam fogging the plastic cover, and she finally said, "My mother thinks I'm ruining my life." I felt my old certainty itch to diagnose. I asked my question instead. What if I'm wrong about what will help? So I said, "That sounds heavy. Do you want me to listen or to offer thoughts?" She laughed, the kind that comes out sideways. "Listening would be a start," she said. So I listened. Her name was Mara. She was 20, leaving a college that never felt like hers to work with a cousin in a bakery. Her parents loved her in a way that made her feel like a project. While we stood there, a man began hovering too close, offering her a ride in a voice that sounded like a dare. I'd have lectured him at 50. At 87, I asked the question again. What if I'm wrong about the safest way to help? I stepped toward the counter and said to the cashier, "Would you mind asking the security guard to come by? That fellow there is making folks uncomfortable." It removed the heat, introduced a witness, and made room for Mara to breathe. The guard wandered over, the man wandered off, and nobody needed to win anything. Before her bus pulled in, I asked if she wanted to call her mother and borrow my years like a blanket. She said yes. I didn't defend Mara's choice. I didn't prosecute her mother's fear. I said, "Hi, I'm a stranger with a granddaughter your daughter's age. She's safe. She's scared. And she's brave. Would you like to hear her voice?" I handed over the phone. They talked. They cried. They didn't fix everything. Sometimes the point of a bridge is not to end the river, but to cross the next 10 feet without drowning. When Mara hugged me at the steps, she said, "Thanks for not trying to be wise." I smiled because I had never felt wiser. That night on the bus home, a man with a cane sat across the aisle, military tattoo fading to a bruise of blue. He was headed to see a brother he hadn't spoken to in 9 years. "He thinks I stole from him," he said. I didn't, but I did take his silence and wear it like a coat. My first instinct was to help him rehearse the perfect defense. Then I asked the only question that has saved me from so many useless victories. What if I'm wrong about the goal of this reunion? We practiced 3 sentences instead. "I miss you. I'm willing to make this right. Tell me how you see it." He wrote them on the back of his ticket and tucked it into his wallet like a prayer. "You asked about self-forgiveness. I avoided it for decades the way a man walks around the soft spot in the yard. After our first miscarriage, I responded with productivity. I booked appointments, compared statistics, made jokes at the wrong moments, and left my wife alone inside a room I didn't know how to enter. I told myself I was being strong. She heard me saying her grief was inconvenient. Years passed. Empty snowy street with old houses, warm yellow lights and windows, thick fog and snowfall, creepy winter night. When I finally had the courage to hold my own failure to the light, I did what I always did. Drafted an essay, rehearsed a speech. Then I remembered the mirror note. What if I'm wrong about the way repair works? So I asked her if we could take a walk, the long route by the creek behind the elementary school that we walked in silence past the chain link and the chalk ghosts of hopscotch. I said, I think I left you alone the first time we lost a baby. I thought fixing was love. I was wrong. My throat burned saying it, the kind that invites a man to retreat to cleverness. I stayed. She stopped, touched the tendon in my wrist with her thumb, and said, I didn't know how to ask for you. I thought not needing was strength. I was wrong too. We put a bench there later, near the water. On the plaque, we didn't put names or dates. We put one sentence. We choose presence over performance. That was the day I learned that forgiveness is not permission for the past. It is permission for the future. The question didn't absolve me. It made me honest. It didn't erase the ache. It let the ache breathe. Sometimes I walked to that bench and watched strangers sit, argue, laugh, scroll their phones, hold each other. I like to imagine the wood remembers our promises even when we forget. The chapel is small, old brick with a door that groans like a cello when it opens. I go there when the city sleeps because midnight makes even certainty whisper. A custodian named Alma leaves the side light on. I sit 3 pews from the back, where the varnish is rubbed thin by hands I'll never meet. It smells like dust and wax and winter coats. In the dark, stained glass stops preaching and simply holds whatever light is left. I bring my question with me and sit on the bench beside me like a companion who doesn't need to fill the air. What if I'm wrong? About what this ache means. About how to measure a life. About the weight I carry for mistakes I cannot unmake. I wait. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes a memory walks up the aisle uninvited and sits down anyway. One night, it was my father at his workbench. Jaw clenched the way men were taught to hold thunder inside. He had apologized with tools and paychecks. Never with words that I had judged him for it. Efficient and proud, I in the chapel, with my palms open, I asked, what if I'm wrong about the language love speaks? And like a slide clicking into focus, I saw his hands fixing my bicycle at midnight, so I could ride at dawn. That he had been fluent in service, that I had been deaf, that I left the chapel that night lighter. Not because I'd solved anything, but because I had swapped indictment for understanding. The question didn't erase boundaries, it clarified bridges. That IT taught me to look for the thread of goodness in people I had reduced to headlines, and to find the splinter in my own certainty before I pointed to the plank. In someone else's. That if you've listened this far, you already know the danger of tidy answers and the hunger underneath them. That I can't tell you what to believe, that I can tell you this practice keeps saving me. Ask the question, breathe, then ask a second, smaller one. What is the next loving thing within reach? Not the grand gesture, the reachable one. Send the text, put the kettle on, step back, step closer, apologize without a comma. To the certain. This will sound like retreat. That IT isn't. It is courage that refuses costume. That IT is the opposite of apathy. That IT asks more of me than victory ever did, because it keeps me responsible to the living instead of loyal to my ego. When I fail, and I still do, the question is waiting without scorn, like a chair pulled out of the table. Sit, it says, begin again. That I know what tomorrow holds, and tonight that feels like a gift. Awe over answers. Humility over headlines. People over positions. If you grew up in pews or swore off sanctuaries, you're welcome here. Subscribe, share your story in the form below, and stay for the questions that will keep choosing the next loving thing together. Keep listening.